Welcome to the Channel 4 Masterclass in how to put kids on TV. What you're going to find in this session is what you can and can't do with kids on TV and how much it's changed, even in very recent years. We're going to look at the responsibilities we have as program makers, filmmakers and broadcasters. You're going to find out whether you need to license or not license. You're going to find out whether you need to psych the children's parents. You're going to find out how tricky and complex consent is and how there's never just one moment when you've got consent, it keeps on going. And we're going to look into how the interests of the child and the parent can sometimes be a little bit at odds. Most importantly of all, we're going to look at how things have changed after TX and how you have looking after your subjects after TX in a world of Twitter is a whole other ballgame that makes things really complex. So on the panel, we have Heather Jackson, who's a senior content compliance lawyer at Channel 4. She's made a speciality of looking after children. She's done everything from brat count to lots of sex programs with children in them. And she was on a working party about the child performance regulations. So if anybody understands the complexity of licensing children or not, it's Heather. And then here on my left is Emma Loach. She's an EP at Dragonfly. You'll have seen her most recent film on Channel 4 last Thursday when the new series of Inside Birmingham Children's Hospital launched. Very, very moving film, which was then reviewed on Gogglebox to great results. And she's done quite a lot of complex, very, very tough programming that involves children. On my right is Teresa Watkins from RDF, and she was created and was in charge of EPing the whole of Secret Life of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. She's just been in the woods very recently making The Secret Life of Siblings, which is a summer special that we've got coming up this summer. And this is Kev Cook, who took the momentous decision last year to allow his 5-year-old son, Alfie, to be in The Secret Life of 5-year-olds. And the empty chair at the end is you will be meeting Alfie later on and see what Alfie has to say about his involvement in Secret Life. So I'm just going to play a little compilation of some of the ways that Channel 4 has got this tricky subject horribly wrong in the past. So let's have a look at the clips from the past. Right. There's so much wrong with those clips. Heather, would you like to just take us through just a few brief headlines of what we got wrong there?
Staying in the dark.
Well, can we have some lights up?
I think it's quite interesting, actually. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, actually, and what's acceptable at one time is not necessarily acceptable at another time. I think... sorry, is it...
No, it's really interesting to see the comedy one. That's so recent, really.
It's so recent, but interestingly, the thing about that one is, I think what I want to say at the start of this session, actually, is that the current Ofcom code and guidance makes it clear that the central concern of programme makers must be that the emotional and physical welfare of children are they're absolutely key and sacrosanct, and also that they shouldn't be caused any unnecessary distress or anxiety. That particular clip, though, the problem we got into there was that wasn't to do with any harm to the child.
What, the swearing child?
The swearing
yes,
child,
yeah.
Because that swearing child was 16, a professional actor, and had given full consent. Parents had seen the script and given full consent as well. The issue there was the offence to the viewing public, who firstly didn't really understand that, they didn't know that, they had no way of knowing that. But Ofcom also thought that, frankly, they just felt that it was wrong, that we should be using somebody who looked like a much younger child to elicit some of the strongest language and quite sexually explicit language. I mean, that clip is nothing by comparison with some of them, which we didn't show you. So that's interesting, that's a different thing. And actually, we might come and talk about that later in terms of Secret Life of 4-year-olds, because there's always that question about the extent to which, if at all, you let the viewers into understanding the protections you put in place for the various children you've got doing whatever it is they're doing.
But Chris Evans got rapped over the knuckles. It was the ITC then, wasn't it? Yeah. And in actual fact, when he did when the series came back again last year, he actually gave that child a holiday in Barbados to say.
Yeah, so, and actually, well, but both of them, actually, there were two. I mean, there was the...
there were boys the week before.
It was cars the week before, with boys and the speedboat this week on that particular occasion. I still have to say that, you know, if you were working on the basis that the central concern was the physical and emotional welfare of the children involved in the television, those television programs, I can't see, frankly, how things would have turned out the way they did, certainly in relation to the TGI Friday one,
yes, and
also in relation to the boxing clip. I think the mini pops is slightly more complex.
We are living in different times now.
We are living in different times, and actually, again, and that was my point about, you know, times change. And that was 1983. In 1982, the Mini Pops pop group, that series, it was the inspiration for that series, had got to, I don't know, the top 30 in the UK and number 1 in France. So
it's the French for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so moving on to the secret life of 4-year-olds, and let's bring on Alfie, who was one of the most celebrated figures in the secret life of 5-year-olds. So it was about 4 years ago that Teresa and I were having discussions. We were brainstorming between us and with Kathy Rogers, about how we could bring things like the famous marshmallow experiment, which is where a child, whether they can delay the gratification of a marshmallow, and it is an enormously telling indicator of what their psychological well-being will be in the future. And the more we drilled into it, we realised that in actual fact, we couldn't ever show that because it was too predictive and it could be potentially too damaging and become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we settled on this format. And Teresa, what you then had about 3 months to cast about 45 children?
60
children.
60 children and their parents.
Yeah. So what did you then go and do? How did you do the recruiting?
Well, that was the fun bit because we set about having. We thought, well, what would we do? We'd all had children ourselves, and we thought, what would we do? We'd have a party. When you have a children's party, that's when you really see children's characters, particularly when you're playing games, and some children win, some children lose. So we set up casting parties at our offices, and I remember Alfie's because you came to our offices, Alfie, and we played some games, but then we also took you to one side and Karen interviewed you. And we just did very short interviews with the children. I remember Alfie's because we said, what is your favourite planet? You were wearing a jacket a bit like you're wearing today. And you said, oh, my favourite planet is Saturn.
Yeah.
We said, why is that? Do you remember?
Because it has beautiful wings.
Because it has beautiful rings around it, and you said, and they make me laugh. And we thought, here's a child with an interesting take on the world. And we remembered you. And when we played that back, we thought, yeah, it's really true. They really do it has beautiful rings around it. So it was easy in those.
It's a gassy planet. It's got a rocky core. If you stand on a gassy planet, you'll sink straight to the bottom before reaching 6,000 kilometres down.
You see,
that's why we cast you.
You know those kind of things, and I don't. And that was the fun of those parties, because it was finding children who they had many different qualities. Some of them, it was just a quality of attention that one noticed that stood out.
So, Kev, how did you make this decision? How did you decide to put Alfie on telly?
Yeah, I think, well, my wife saw an ad through social media, and we were just curious and thought it sounded like a good experience. And we put forward a video which was actually one of his homeworks that he had done, where he had to do a thing about a journey, and he always really loves going up to London and the tube and everything.
Yeah, it's right, I love that.
Yeah, you do.
I've always been on the Underground since I've been born.
Yeah, and also, in absolute honesty, some of it was that, there's 2 weeks accommodation in London here, and we're getting an extension built in the summer. And we've got to be out of the house for a period.
Tell me that.
Yeah, he's my album.
So there were a few other things where it's like, actually this falls quite nicely from the plan. But it just seemed like a really kind of fun opportunity. And as parents, I think you're always at a bit of a loss where you have loads of conversations with health visitors where so-and-so is happening with my child, and like, yeah, well, that's perfectly normal. And you go, okay. And then you go, well, and then you're kind of going with another question. Everything's, everyone's different. So everyone's different and everything's normal. And so any sort of insight into children, I think, even if it's your own, and you're kind of going, well, I do wonder what they do at nursery, because they say they haven't done anything, and clearly they haven't. I remember that was one of the comments that came out of the program, was actually, they do so much that they can't remember at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we were kind of just curious just to peek into his life a little bit as well, I think.
But so then the moment came, Heather, when we came to you and said, right, there's 60 children, do we license or don't we license? Give us a very brief guide of the licensing situation as it stands now.
I'm not sure it's possible to give a brief guide of the licensing. However, anybody who's been involved in it will know, involved in trying to license children or work out whether or not you need to license this, it's not particularly clear cut. I have to say, I think we're all clear now that if there's an element of direction, or you're taking your children out of their normal environment, the chances are you probably are walking into the territory where you need to be considering whether or not you need to license.
And this is licensing by the local authority.
And this is the local authority will do the licensing, but it's the production company who are responsible for obtaining that license, applying for that license with the relevant local authority, and it's the local authority that the children go to school in. I think over the last few years, the dilemma we've had is if you license a child, you are constrained, I think probably most of us would think on balance is a good thing, by a series of regulations which talk about, they set down quite clear rules about the number of hours the children can work. And the way they've done it now is they've kind of banded it into age groups. So different age group children can work so many hours, so many days. They have to have a certain amount of breaks over whatever period it is. But all that stuff is all fine. I think the key issue is, do you need to license or not? And that is sometimes really not easy to determine. And I know with you guys, you licensed for the duration, didn't you? But there are some, because you were taking the children out to a completely new environment, and you were doing quite directed elements to it. But we have had situations where we take children out of their normal environment and put them on a residential course, for example. The Mr. Drew Summer School is something that some of you might remember. It was a few years ago now. We took a bunch of boys who were basically at risk of being kicked out of school or had been kicked out of school. They were all about 11 or 12. So they were all within the age group that needed to be licensed. However, they could not have made that program in the way that they did if the whole of the 2-week period needed to be licensed. It just wouldn't have been possible. And so what they did was, with the help of PACT and with, I'm sitting with this thing on my lap here, there's an organisation called the National Network for Children in Employment and Entertainment, the NNCEE, and there's a woman who kind of heads that up called Sandra Rothwell. And with PACT and Sandra, the production company sat down and they worked out which portions of the 2-week period would amount to licensable activity. And so they broke it down into little sections. So the whole of the 2 weeks the children didn't need to be licensed for, but they did need to be licensed for certain periods on certain days, which made this program possible. And I think increasingly, actually, we're in that territory where there's a discussion to be had at the very outset with the production company, and then knowing what we know, all the experience that we've got over the last few years from doing these types of programs, then going to PAC, talking to Sandra, and then agreeing a format, as it were. And the benefit for you guys as production companies of doing that is you can, once Sandra says, yep, that's okay, she then kind of acts as not an advocate as such, but she's a facilitator. And you have to bear in mind that a lot of the local authorities that you're going to be dealing with really are majorly under-resourced and don't have the expertise to actually make these decisions themselves. So you can save yourself a whole heap of pain by going through this process, because she will basically, effectively, almost do it for the other local authorities, which is going to make it a lot easier for you.
Because if you were to go and actually direct a child and not license, and then someone deemed that should have been licensed,
that's an offence.
What's the consequence?
It's a criminal offence, and it's always important to remember that it's the local authority who decides whether or not something is licensable. It's not you as the production company. Now, it might be that you are so clear and you've spoken to your Channel 4 programme lawyer, if you're working with Channel 4, and we're absolutely confident that it doesn't fall within any licensable activity. That's fine, but if there's any doubt, then we do need to sit down and have a discussion and then take it, as I say, in the first instance, I would be advising the production companies to take it to PACT.
So
for us, in discussion with Heather, we kind of arrived at an understanding, because we had some surreal conversations along the way about, if a nursery teacher is reading the children a story, is that directed or undirected? Because if it's directed activity, then it's on the clock and licensable, and if it's undirected activity, it's not on the clock. But we came to an understanding that any task that the scientists were suggesting would be on the clock, and any free play in the nursery or anything that the nursery teacher would naturally do in a play scheme or in a nursery was off the clock. So something like the chocolate cake, am I allowed to mention that? We're about to see it, aren't we?
Yeah.
Something like the chocolate cake, which a lot of people remember, that was actually a science task that had been suggested by a scientist. It was something that was done in America, and it's actually a test of lying. It's a test to see if children confabulate about why this chocolate cake has got marks taken out of it, why there's chocolate all over their mouths. And if they can lie, it actually shows they have theory of mind, which means they can empathise with other people. So it was actually a science test, although it ended up looking just like a piece of fun in our show. But that was all the time that took us to film, that was on the clock.
So, Alfie, do you want to see a bit of you licking the top of the chocolate cake?
Yeah, I love that.
Shall we see the chocolate cake, please? No. So, Alfie, do you remember when that happened?
Yeah.
Because it's like nearly a year ago now, isn't
Can we
it?
do the bit with the gumball machine now?
We haven't got that bit, I'm afraid.
Painting bit?
Yes, that's coming up later.
Yeah,
That's coming.
we'll do that.
So, Alfie, what was it like when your daddy came to you and said, "We're going to do this thing on the telly"? Can you remember?
Exciting!
You were excited about it. And for you, did you make friends when you were there?
Yeah, I'm always making friends.
Okay, who was the best friend?
I
you
like
made?
making friends.
Yeah. Who was the best friend you made when you were there?
Emily.
Emily. And do you still see Emily?
Yeah, always write to her.
Do you?
Because I'm going to marry her.
So, take me through the consents. And Kev, you were trying to decide whether you were giving consent for Alfie, and Teresa, you were accepting the parents giving their consent. Do you feel that's always the best way to do it? Is the parent always the ultimate arbiter of whether the child should be on the telly or not?
I think that different children. I think there's such a kind of spectrum of understanding of kids at these ages, really. And I think that probably different children would understand the process better than others. And I think it kind of depends perhaps how much TV they're exposed to in the first place and things like that. And I think that really, if I'm honest, I think that whilst we did ask him, I don't think we could honestly say that he truly understood what he was going in for. I think that it was just about us feeling comfortable with it, kind of trusting and feeling that there were lots of sort of procedures in place. We had the call from the psychologist and all these different things that were all part of it. And we've been involved in this follow-up show, and of course his knowledge of that was much better, and he was very much sort of up for it, from the outset. And I think that we knew, all you can really go on is think how well you know that child and think, okay, is this the kind of thing they're likely to like? And, is he shy? No. Is he someone that kind of just likes to quite get involved with things and have a go at stuff and meet people and just have a bit of a play? Then, yeah, and so it kind of seemed like an opportunity for an experience for him, I think is the best way. So I think, I think that RDF and all the people involved did all that they could in that respect. I don't think, and they were keen to sort of stress what they could on that side of things, but I think that they just simply, and maybe, I think now, maybe just because he's a year older as well, but I think that it wasn't possible really to get to know for sure, I think.
But you used to ask every day.
Yes, so it's our job
yes.
just to inform Kev and Zoe as much as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, did you feel that you were prepared for what then transpired in the film?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we do the bit when...
We're going to do the faces in about 5 minutes.
Stop.
Okay, we'll do the
Right.
faces in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Not in terms of post-TX, but in terms of the actual events that were actually taking place.
Yeah, I think so. I think we were as well prepared as we could, and Teresa was there. We were getting lots of feedback throughout the whole process as well. And you were kind of coming into the room where we were able to watch some of it as it went. And what was quite nice about, I don't think it was actually originally part of the plan that the parents were going to be there as much as we were, was it? I don't think.
No.
It kind of just ended up being a bit of a sort of mummies and daddies group where we all kind of...
I'll just explain that, because I suppose I see it as our job to try and seek what we would think of as ongoing consent. There's not one moment when Kev and Zoe signed and then we know, right, Alfie's in it, and we put that away. We consider it's our job to keep talking to the parents all the way through pre-production, all the way through the shoot, and then all the way through the edit. And what you were just referring to there was that during the shoot itself, because it was a first series, we actually had screens up and we asked parents to come to the first day of the shoot, and they actually watched what was happening. They had a big wide-angled camera of what was happening inside the playroom, what was happening outside. They couldn't hear everything, but they could just hear the general atmosphere microphone. And that just meant that they could see how we were dealing with issues that were arising. They knew how the teachers were dealing with things, and it just gave them that confidence. I don't think we're going to do that for the second series, because now there's a first series to look at. And so people can see what kind of behaviour the series features and how we deal with it and how the scientists deal with it. But that first series, it felt very, very important.
Yeah, and as I say, you were kind of coming in, and I think there was just a lot of communication all the way.
I'm saying when me and George were arguing about the sun, what's the sun's made of.
No, we're not going to show that one.
No.
Sorry.
People can all watch that in their own time.
Alfie, do you remember that at the start of every day, you probably don't remember this, but when we were putting your microphone on, we would say to you every morning, do you know that you were being filmed yesterday, and are you happy for that to happen again? And how, did you enjoy it? Are you happy to come back into the playroom? Do you remember anyone asking you that?
Yeah.
So probably people like Anushka.
Yeah.
So what I've just outlined is what we called ongoing assent with the children. Now, how old are you now, Alfie? Are you 6? Yeah, so you were 5 last year, weren't you, when we were filming with you? So it's young, but, advised by Heather, she said children are young enough, they watch television, they know what these programs are like, and you must at least ask the question. And if a child says, no, I don't want to go and be filmed today, we would then have to stop, stand back, talk to the parents, sometimes talk to the chaperones, and not continue unless that child was happy.
So so we are relying on parental consent. That's the only thing we have to go on, because at this stage they can't fully consent. Have you ever encountered a time when the broadcaster thinks, oh, the parent's consenting, but oh my God, I think we need to tread even more carefully, because I don't think it's in the best interest for the child to be on telly?
Absolutely, and the key thing actually is that irrespective of parental consent or the child's consent, parental consent, we have an overriding duty basically to make the best decision we can for that child. So, it won't surprise people to learn that obviously there are a large number of quite pushy parents out there who it's not that they don't necessarily want the best for their child, but sometimes perhaps what they think is the best is not necessarily, it doesn't chime with what we know or feel. And in those circumstances, absolutely, yes, we've absolutely said, you know.
That's quite hard for a broadcaster and for a commissioning editor who's desperate for a moment when a child is outrageous or completely precocious, and it makes great telly.
Yeah, but much harder than to go ahead with it, get to the end of filming, and then work out at that point that you can't actually use it, or that you use it and you do some irreparable damage to the child. So I think I always encourage everybody to make the fullest of investigations at the earliest stage, and sometimes, notwithstanding the, you know, all the talks that parents get given by the production companies and psyching, even then, we do have instances where people, I won't say slip through the net. I mean, sometimes it's slipping through the net, and sometimes it's just people's circumstances change. And, you know, it might have been appropriate for a child at the outset of the production to be involved, but actually by the time you come to TX, something's happened. You know, the child might be in a different stage developmentally, which wasn't foreseeable. And absolutely, we've said, no, we're not going to...
Did we exclude anyone on the basis of psych tests?
We didn't, but we adapted our behaviour or the way we work with them. But I mean, that's the key check and balance in there, is a psychologist who we employ, recommended, I think, well, no, anyway, we employ a psychologist who meets every family independently and talks to them and then writes quite a full report, which comes to us and to Channel 4. And if there are any concerns, they're flagged then, and we just take those with the, you know, we treat them with the utmost seriousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would never, ever override the expert opinion of a psych. I mean, we could certainly go back and ask them to explore a bit more if, as you say, the commissioning editor is absolutely in love with this particular child, but we would certainly never override their advice.
Okay, are you ready for the next clip, Alfie?
Yeah.
Okay, now this is the bit where you get a bit upset.
I know.
Are you sure it's all right for us to show
Fine.
it?
It's fine. It's all right.
Okay, let's see the face painting clip, please. Alfie, we feel really sad when we look at that because we think we could see that.
I don't.
Don't you? Oh, that's good. Because we could see that. So what you'd been asked to do, you had to. The scientists thought it would be especially challenging for a 5-year-old to try and represent a different child. And it was quite hard to paint Ruth, wasn't it? And then she got a tiny bit upset. But the best thing about it of all was that at the very end, Ruth got upset and you were really nice to her and you comforted her. So that's why we played it. Like, that's why we felt
Nobody comforted me. I comforted her.
That's true. It's very true. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember why you got upset?
Yeah.
Which was why?
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you remember why you felt upset then?
Yes,
Was it because they were saying you weren't going to win?
Yeah.
So we wrestled in the edit with this section a lot. So this scene was played at about 12 minutes long. It was the most extraordinarily long scene. And in some ways it's quite dark. And we just allowed it to play out. But take me through some of the creative decisions that, in terms of allowing it to be that long and allowing, and what the sense of responsibility we felt that we were showing the pain to a child that we had caused.
I mean, any of those moments when somebody, somebody like Alfie gets upset, we would be, because this was a rigged documentary, there were no camera people in there, it was automatic, so we were watching it in a truck. Any moments when a child gets upset, it would be electric in the truck, because you'd be weighing up what the scientists had said about this task. In other words, this was a task in which we gave Alfie the responsibility for Ruth's representation, and we gave George the responsibility for Lily's. And it was a kind of double task. They had to paint. And actually, your mum said you'd never done a painting before, which was quite hard to believe, but she said you hadn't actually done a painting.
I tend to be more pencil crayon person.
Yeah, so that was
Done a portrait.
You had done a portrait.
No.
You hadn't, exactly. So you were doing that for the first time, and then Ruth said to you, "It doesn't look like me." And then I remember we were watching your face, and at that point you said something utterly brilliant, I think, which was you said, right, you kind of soothed yourself, and you said, oh, I'm going to add some facts here. So you did a little arrow, and then you wrote mouth. You did a little arrow, and you wrote eyes, and you did a little arrow, and it was her nose. And she didn't like that, but I thought it was brilliant. So we were on tenterhooks. You could have heard a pin drop in the truck, because you do not want to be responsible for any child's distress. On the other hand, there was never any moment during that task when we thought, right, we must intervene. I think at some points we sent the teacher in, but because we thought that you actually were coping with it so well, we could see you were upset, but what you seemed to be doing was finding ways to almost comfort yourself. And one of those at the end was saying to yourself, well, they're not going to vote for me because they'd already said as much. And then you seemed to accept that. But then when Ruth got upset and she wouldn't vote for anyone and she started crying, you said to her, I think your words were, Ruth, just a minute ago, tears were sprouting out of my eyes too. But I just made myself feel better, and why don't you come out and play? Do you remember that? She was sitting in the home corner. And what we saw there was an incredible arc of you getting upset, then cheering yourself up, and then using your experience to actually help somebody else.
I draw a picture of it and show it to you
That would
when
be
I'm going back to
fantastic.
her.
That would be fantastic. Let me give you a bit of paper. Or have you got some paper out there?
Sections of it.
Sections of it. That would be wonderful. Yes, so
So, Kev, how was that when you actually saw that for the first time? For us, it's because we're yearning for drama and for insight, and it was illustrating so many of the things that the scientists wanted, because almost like Alfie almost gained theory of mind in the middle of that scene. It was amazing. How was it for you? Did you feel that we'd gone too
I think
far?
it'd been preempted a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that we were kind of given a bit of advance of it. I think even on the day, I think in one of your sort of updates. And the thing is, obviously the nature of TV is kind of selective, and it's only telling part of Alfie's experience that day, which I think ended with him running around London Bridge train station hand in hand with Ruth, singing London Bridge is burning down. So it's, excuse. So, like with some of the kind of interactions with George and things, they're only really, and it is part, it's obviously the nature of the form to sort of try and tell a story, but there's so many other things that are going on that day that I think that probably by the end of the day, he's kind of moved on from it a bit. And like I say, there would be kind of countless times throughout that week where he's played really nicely with Ruth or vice versa, and it's just you've just got that opportunity for that insight at that time. So I think that we were able to have that kind of bigger picture perspective on things with that knowledge. That was one of the things that was sort of nice about what we were talking about earlier, where we were getting these updates on things. And so I remember my wife Sara was quite upset because she's probably, it's not nice to see your child crying on TV, obviously, but I think that we were able to kind of take resolve in the fact that we knew that there had been all these other kind of great things that had happened for him in that week.
So you watched the full cuts before transmission, and this is something that we should do with children on television, let the parents see the cut before transmission?
I mean, I certainly when I started working at Channel 4 in about 2002, we hardly ever showed anybody anything. It was, absolutely verboten. But actually, I think we've got to a stage now where it feels entirely right and appropriate that certainly children, if they want to see it, I mean, actually some children don't want to see it, actually. And again, depending on what it is, we take guidance from certainly the parents, but also independent experts. I mean, sometimes we don't know whether it's going to be a good thing for a child to see the whole of something they're in, or whether they just need to see certain bits of it, or whether they just need to be talked through it. But I think, generally speaking, there's a keenness, wherever possible, that the children should own it, should own their contribution. And because apart from anything else, actually, you know, when it comes to transmission, and we might come and talk about this a bit later, there's a whole world of pain out there, and I think it's much easier if you actually know in advance, you know, what your contribution is, and you know, very often we give children opportunity to talk to their schools about their involvements, again, just to sort of try and diffuse anything that might come about as a result of their contribution. Sorry, probably.
So what was it like when it went out? I'm going to talk about the serious things later, but when it actually went out, did you watch it on the telly when it actually went out?
Yeah.
And what did the friends at school think? Did they say anything the next day at school?
Well,
Had they seen you on the telly?
yeah.
And then I've actually heard that you've become a little bit of a local celebrity. Did something happen when you saw the owls on the owl stall? Did they recognise you? And so you actually got to pat the owls more than the other children because you were famous.
Didn't have to pay.
You didn't have to pay. There you go.
Right.
£2.
Did you actually get to stroke the owls?
Cabbage Friday.
Right, brilliant. Okay, Alfie, we're going to talk about other things now. So we're going to say thank you very much
You do that
indeed to
drawing.
you. And we do the drawing now, and then at the very, very end, will you show us the drawing that you've done?
Yeah.
Okay, so Stephanie's going to take you off now. Okay,
Brilliant.
so- Okay, I'm moving on to the whole other section of Channel 4's coverage of children in documentary for the proper docs, I could say, which is the side where we don't have licensing. And Emma has just started transmitting inside Birmingham Children's Hospital. Can you take me through, before I show the first clip, you just take me through how you sorted out the consents there and the mix, so you've got some rig and some normal doc?
So it was obviously very different because we weren't doing anything to these children. This was an observational documentary. We were just following what was happening anyway. We met children in two different ways. There was sort of... we had a fixed rig, so the children and the families came onto that rig, and obviously we didn't know who was going to turn up on any day. So in that situation, we had people sort of on the floor who would go up to them. When you go into hospital, you have a much higher expectation of privacy, so you can't do any filming without consent. So we would go onto the floor and talk to them and say, this is something we're doing at the moment. Would you like to be involved? Would you like to hear more about it? At that point, we didn't know what was wrong with the child. They didn't know whether they were going to be in hospital for an hour or if this was going to be a long relationship with the hospital. So it was sort of ludicrous to think that they could make any decisions about whether they wanted to be involved in a documentary. So at that point, it really was, do you mind being filmed at the moment?
Do you have a set rule of what age is capacity? Was it Gillick competent? Is there an age when you say this child can make their mind up? Or
No. It
Yeah.
depends on I mean, it'll vary enormously because what one 10-year-old is capable of understanding and processing, another 10-year-old won't. You might have an incredibly sophisticated 6-year-old and a not very sophisticated 10-year-old. So, no, I mean, it really depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
The child's circumstances, the programme, the nature of the programme, you know, all the circumstances.
So in tandem...
And in tandem, we were meeting people in a sort of classic observational documentary way in which, you know, we were hanging out in all the different 34 departments, I think, across the hospital, talking to consultants, speaking to people in waiting rooms. But then that's much easier because you talk to them, you get a relationship with them before they come anywhere near a camera. So that's much sort of a more natural event. But no, in terms of the rig, we just, it was whoever turned up and whether they said yes.
So here's Ellie, who turned up on the rig and you had no idea. So let's see a brief clip of Ellie, which is on this coming Thursday's show.
Yeah.
So tell me about Ellie's, what was her story?
So she arrived with her dad in the emergency department. They were mucking about in the waiting room. She was really up. They were singing. There was no clue that this was a mental health situation, case. And going into this series, I think we were quite clear that we didn't really want to do very dark stories. We wanted it to be quite a safe programme for people to watch. So we weren't looking for cases that dealt with mental illness. we didn't know what was wrong with her, but she came up to the person who was working on the floor and said, you know, you really should follow me because most people are in here for broken bones, but I've got something wrong with my mind, and people like me never get to be on television. And she'd seen Bedlam, the Channel 4 series, recently, and thought it was brilliant and really, you know, felt that it gave her a voice, and she was a 14-year-old girl desperate to tell her story. She was on, you know, we filmed her that day, then we assigned a producer-director to work with her, who then filmed with her for a year. Her family were absolutely on board. She's never wavered in terms of wanting to be involved. We had to get involved with her mental health nurses, the CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, were involved. So we were talking to all of her doctors. And we all had concerns. I mean, her recovery wasn't that. You know, her recovery sort of went like that a bit. But she never faltered, really. And I think, you know, then at some point you do think, God, we do have a responsibility to put these, you know, stories. And they are really difficult stories to tell, and especially in this sort of series. But I think when you come across a family that are capable of telling such a difficult story, then, you know, we have a responsibility to try and tell it.
So her secret was that she was trans, gender-confused identity. And
Yeah.
I hadn't forewarned you about this question, and say if you don't want to talk about it, but you're going through exactly a similar dilemma in the Tavistock with a gender-confused.
Yep.
I don't. Is Liesl here? Liesl is here. I don't know if you want to share that story or not, or is it too delicate? Yeah.
Well, which story are you talking
The story about the fact that you have a child who is confused about their gender, but it was secret in their community.
Yeah.
But now they moved to a different community, and then they did the telly, and then they've gone back.
Gosh.
And just so. But with Ellie, she was open about knowing she felt she was a boy.
Yeah.
And I mean, the most wonderful climax of the programme is seeing her in Pride March, when she's just exuberantly full of joy. He's now Alex, and he just looks fantastic, and he looks wonderful.
And Alex,
yes.
he now was homeschooled, so there were sort of slightly different things to think about, but he has a younger brother who's at secondary school, so our duty of care was also on the younger brother.
Yeah. And I think the same thing with this. I mean, it's not just the child. Obviously, it's a family as well. But I mean, to be honest, all I can say about that is it's a long game, because you have to get them, you have to earn their trust. Again, with this little girl, forgive me, but I can't quite remember how old she is. I think she's 11 actually. She's quite young.
She's 8.
8.
Yeah.
Oh, she's 8?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. But anyway, yes, very, very young. But she really wanted to do it. Her mother, from what I've only seen the first cut, the mother, you could see she was quite ambivalent. You know, she could see the pros and cons, but basically she wanted to support her daughter, who seems to have been very single-minded about this. But yes, it's difficult because, you know, you stay with them, and we were having this conversation just before we started the session. You have to respect the fact that they might change because their world is changing. I mean, all children's worlds change, but for these guys, even more so. And you kind of have to be prepared for them, I suppose, at any stage to turn around and say...
And that's going to be on all 4, or going to be pirated onto YouTube for the next 50 years of their lives.
But what I would say about these guys is, you know, they have been on such journeys, and I think probably to get to where they are in any event, I think maybe a fair few of them are kind of over it, because, you know, actually this little girl, I mean, I think one of the reasons she wanted to, I understand, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that she wanted to find a way of actually just getting it out there.
Yes.
Because actually it was all too difficult. She had been, as you said, she'd been moved around from one place to another. She wanted to keep it quiet. That didn't work. And then she ended up moving back to her community, original community, where she was much happier, and she had a support network and so on and so forth. So, but that can change overnight.
So the rig is supplying you with this amazing array of stories, which you can, and then and you know right from the beginning, because of the way they respond to the cameras at that moment, what their level of consent's going to be and how keen they are.
Yeah.
So is that almost easier to get participants in your film than the normal way where you go in behind the back, the back door with the doctors who ask people if they want to take
In some ways, because they're a captive audience, they know they've got 4 hours to, it's quite an interesting thing to be involved in. There's nice people from the telly come and chat to them. So you probably have a higher consent rate in that way. But then it's a very long process. We then continue to film with them for months and months. So they have to sort of want to do it for quite a sustained period of time. So it is a self-selecting group, and we found it's the people who actually really wanted to say something were the easier people to keep on board. The ones that sort of, broke a wrist and were in and out in an hour and don't really have any investment in the programme, they were sort of harder to keep on board in some ways.
Yeah. What was the most difficult period for you during the filming? Where did it wrench your gut the most? What were the stories that really got to you?
Well, again, we didn't go after the dark stories, but there are 2 deaths in the series, one in the first 5 and one in the second 5 episodes. And we had to think, we didn't go looking for them at all. They came onto the rig, and when they did, the one that's on next week is a young lad, 8-year-old, who came in with a brain tumour, and it was terminal. He didn't know it was terminal. Again, they were funny and warm, and you won't know watching it that this is what's wrong with him. He's an absolutely charming little boy, and then the mother told us that he had terminal brain cancer. And we had to think long and hard about whether we, partly for the audience actually, sat at home watching, do you want to take the audience on this journey where they'll definitely fall in love with Lucas? You spend an hour of your life watching this gorgeous little boy, and then you have to grieve him at 3 minutes to 10 o'clock. Do we want to do that to the audience? Is it, is there a point to do it? Is it just sort of, medical porn? And I think we felt that there was a really good reason to tell the stories. Again, the parents never faltered. They always wanted to be involved, and you can imagine why. They wanted to get some sort of sense. They felt a huge gratitude to the hospital. The palliative care team were amazing. They sort of wanted to show the world that. They wanted to, a testimony to their amazing little boy. But that was, that's a tough decision to make.
Can I just ask a question there? Because obviously I hadn't seen it. He didn't know he was dying, presumably, right up until the end, he didn't know. I was just wondering what discussions you had as between yourselves in relation to, because obviously he's not in a position to give consent because he doesn't know he's just about to die. I just wondered I'm just interested what kind of conversations there were around that.
Well, we had obviously the conversations of, do you want to be filmed today? Those conversations each time. As soon as he came off the rig, we assigned him to a producer director called Chris Taylor, and they had an amazing relationship. And he got to know Chris very well, and they had a really sort of tight bond. So they would have conversations about filming, and they would have conversations about what would happen in the edit, and whether they had elliptical conversations about whether he would still see it. The truth is, I think his mum thought he did know he was dying, but unfortunately they never had that conversation. His mum did have conversations with him about how sometimes children don't survive this, and so I think there was sort of a.
But you wouldn't have transmitted it until after he died. It wouldn't have. No. He needed to.
No, he died. He was dying within a few weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not. You veer towards very challenging topics. So you've got a film that you're in production, that you're in the edit with at the moment.
Yeah.
Would you like to set up the next clip?
Yeah, so this came out of another programme I made with Jessie Versluis about the homicide service who look after people who've been bereaved by murder. And this is a film for Elisa Pomeroy about a charity called Winston's Wish who look after children bereaved for all sorts of things. And they do residential weekends, and this is a residential weekend for children bereaved by murder.
Okay, so this is still in production. This is still being edited, but this is the pre-title of the next clip, The Weekend, please. so many ethical minefields, I don't even know where to start. So some of them have neither parent. Some of them have still have a father, but the father's in prison because he's murdered their mother.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you get consent from in
So
that
we
case?
have to go to the people who have parental responsibility. And in the case where the father is in prison, the grandparents have got parental responsibility. We will inform the father, but we don't need to ask his permission.
Right. So take me through the process of talking to those children initially.
So so it was all through the Winston's Wish and the therapists. The therapists there have been working with these kids for a year and a half at least. And the weekend is sort of the culmination of all that work. We did everything through Winston's Wish. So we went and the director, Kirsty Cunningham, and the assistant producer, Charlotte Sinden, would go with the therapist from the Winston's Wish and meet the family as a sort of a, as someone sort of, just watching really, and then would speak to them at the end and say what we were doing and see if they wanted to be involved. Again, we had a ludicrous hit rate at that point. It's terrible language, you can't even say hit rate, but anyway. Ludicrous, consent rate. Most of the families, I think we had 18 families, and most of them said they were interested in being involved. But obviously the consent process is an ongoing thing, and it was a very complicated thing at the beginning. We were dealing with children. The children were going to be away from their carers. So we actually, it's conversation after conversation after conversation, isn't it? And it builds up. There was going to be 2 weekends that the Winston's Wish were putting on for this, for children bereaved by murder. One was going to be filmed and one wasn't going to be filmed. So their treatment wasn't going to be changed in any way. And we were very clear that they could go on the one that was being filmed or the one that wasn't being filmed. Still, a lot of people wanted to be involved. We produced a booklet. We're working with a woman called Sheila Beckett, who's a childcare consultant, who was talking here yesterday, actually. And we produced a booklet for 2 different ages of kids, which the carer could sort of sit down and almost read through this sort of book about what it means to be involved in a television programme, what cameras are used, what will happen when the stuff is edited. And the truth is, the kids who are sort of teenagers, young teenagers, are so aware of, they're making films the whole time. They're teaching us stuff. The 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds, had a very basic understanding. And as you were saying earlier, you get their assent, not their consent, I think. They were very aware of all the filming. I have to say that we were never with the kids without a therapist there. So it's a tiny sort of bubble. Yeah. We don't interview the kids without, there are no interviews. So everything we see is an observed therapy session. And if it's age appropriate, they will watch their scenes. The younger kids, we will probably cut together some scenes that are sort of suitable for them to watch.
Who was telling me about you always have to show them the worst scene first?
Well, that was for them on the Murder Workers programme. We were given advice by a trauma specialist that there was a lad in that, a group of kids.
And what show was that?
It's called The Murder Workers. It was a Channel 4 Cutting Edge. And there were a group of kids, some siblings, whose mother had been killed by their father. And the whole film, when it's cut to music and it's crafted to be a sort of an emotional journey. The trauma specialist said that people who have been through trauma can't be taken on that
because they have a sense
journey, because they can't control their adrenaline. Once their adrenaline spikes, they can't bring it back down again, so they spiral off. So they suggested that we show them completely out of sync. So we would say to these kids, which scene do you want to watch first? And they tended to go to the end, seeing the one that they just remembered filming, and then we go to the beginning. So we did it completely out of order, so that they didn't go on that sort of emotional journey.
Gosh, when will we see Winston's Wish Weekend?
To ask Elisa, I don't know.
Is she there? Oh, hello. Do we know when that's going to be on? At the end of the year, okay. Right, very challenging, very moving, very moving. Should we go back to the general issues that arise when you put one of these programs out on air, and we are now in this very different world because everyone who's watching it is saying instantly what they think. Let's talk to you first, Teresa. What was it like when you first saw the Twitter feed of Secret Life when it first went out?
Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. I mean, it's mainly wonderful, and you have to
Yeah.
keep things in perspective. But the idea that anybody out there could say anything less than positive and wholesome about a child just kind of beggars belief. But there are people out there who do that. And so, what we do is we advise parents not to go on Twitter. But I think, as Kev said, or Zoe said, they're our children. Of course we're going to go on.
You were told very, very, very strongly not to go on.
Very
weren't you?
explicitly, do not look. Which is,
Yeah. So what happened?
Tempting. Well, we looked. Neither of us are really. We don't really use Twitter, either of us really.
But you're quite media savvy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Media
So I kind of, I'm a lecturer about it, so
Yeah.
I have an awareness of it, but I don't use it, and I suppose that in that sense I was slightly taken aback by some of the personalities that can be found out there, and and of course we kind of looked, and the first kind of couple of things are kind of really sweet, and so you kind of you want to kind of feed your kind of parental ego and go, oh, yes, flatter my, son more or whatever. And then some pretty shocking things kind of get said over really kind of quite small things. And the thing is, we had seen the pre-edits or whatever, and the things that people were picking up on were things that had completely gone past us.
What sort of things?
Well, there's a moment in the strangely, the one that got me the most, there's a moment in the first episode where Alfie's introduced himself to people, and I think he introduced himself to Devon.
Yeah.
And
He was Indian.
He was Indian and from Watford. And Alfie's kind of really in his face as he's talking to them, and he asked Devon, do they speak a different language in Watford? And I think that what isn't necessarily clear from that point in the case, first of all, that Alfie wears hearing aids, and so he's quite deaf. So one of the reasons why he's right in this guy's grill, I think, Alfie's in the grill or whatever was the tag thing going. And I don't think he was missing it. But also there were several other kids on the shoot that did speak different languages. There was, I think Jada was speaking French, wasn't she? And
Ghanaian and
and Ruth was Ghanaian. And so the chances are he'd probably had conversations where a few of the people he'd bumped into did speak these other languages. All of a sudden the hashtag little racist kind of pops up on Twitter, and you're thinking, I feel really uncomfortable. Even if people are using it flippantly, I feel really uncomfortable with that. And then there was this whole idea, oh, he's from Somerset, what do you expect, sort of thing. I was like, oh, that's really unfair, but things will play out, and you kind of whatever. But there were some other bits where there had obviously been this kind of, part of the narrative was this kind of rivalry with George. Rivalry is not really fair, but they were very different characters, and so there was this kind of, binary thing going on. And it seemed like people were kind of taking sides pretty much in this. And one of the, there's a bit where George throws a pen, I think, at Alfie. And Alfie is, being a little bugger at that point. And both when me and Zoe watched it at home, it's like, yeah, you deserve that, Alfie. But when other people say that, that's kind of like, oh, you can't say that about someone else. And there was someone out there that said something like, someone shut that effing Rick up. He reminds me of the little kid. He reminds me of the kind of kids I used to bully at school. You think, what kind of a thing is that to put out in the world? That and it was very hard not to get involved.
Yes.
And we kind of really just had to sort of bite our lip on things. And I think that, I think through Zoe we were kind of in touch with Channel 4 and different things, and they kind of took actions to close a lot of those things down. And it was uncomfortable. But there were lots of nice things being said as well. And of course, you kind of remember. I think you said already. You remember the bad things. But the next morning, I think it might have been Karen. Would it have been Karen that had done it? had put together an email that was just like a collection of like all of the nice things that had been said.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really nice gesture, not really comfortable, but it really did help. And also what kind of helped was just dipping into a few of these people accounts and going, yeah, you just say this sort of thing about anyone and everyone. This isn't about my kid. This is about you.
Yes.
And so you can kind of just wash your hands a bit. And then in the second week, he kind of managed to redeem himself a little bit anyway. And then by the Christmas episode, everyone's just like completely fallen in love with him because he had this kind of really sweet moment with Emily there. And so...
So you carried on reading them?
No, we'll go. Yeah, guilty of that.
And you'll carry on reading them this summer?
Most likely, I think. I think because we've got that perspective on things.
So we monitor them at the office, and then we talk to parents the next day, and our duty of care really kicks in again around TX, and unusually for most programs, we keep our casting producers right through the edit, and they're heavily involved. But the danger is you start making films for Twitter.
Yeah, which we're not meant to be doing.
And these are two idiots out there who said things, but they become disproportionately important, like you're saying.
Yeah,
and that's the danger, I think.
I mean, also what I would add, I think part of the temptation to look is that I suppose you're thinking, well, even if I don't look, other people are seeing these things.
Yes.
And I kind of want to know
So that
what, say, some parent down the street
Yeah.
has said about. So there's that kind of just being I think that's kind of half the reason for looking. Yeah. Partly it's out of curiosity, but it's also just that awareness of
forewarned and
not to be getting the approval of things, but just to be aware of what conversations are being had out there.
And Heather, there's nothing we can do, is there?
There's very little we can do, actually. I mean, it's a really important discussion to be having, because actually it's a really big thing for Ofcom, actually. Not just in the duty of care when the programme is going out, but actually really as part of the consent process as well. It's really important that when you're trying to get people's consent to take part in these things, that they understand that these days, sadly, this is what comes with it. And it will pass, it always does pass, but it's horrible when it's happening. And that does make, I mean, it's a consideration that, you absolutely have to take it into account when you're looking for contributors. Is this person, is this family robust enough to actually withstand this? So, Ofcom will want to see, they make it quite clear, they want to see that you have these discussions with people and that you've properly assessed their robustness in that respect. But also, as you say, that, as it comes closer to transmission, you give people help, and advice, but they take or leave. I mean, I think the difficulty with children is, it's all well and good you looking, and obviously Alfie's too young, but, when you've got teenagers who are involved, you can, with the best will in the world, you can tell them, not to look at this stuff. So all the more important, because the chances are they're going to be looking at it. But that's something that you as production staff, will explore with them, and it's certainly something that the psych, if they're psyched, would be exploring them with them as well. I sometimes feel, and again, we had this discussion just before, actually, I think older people are slightly more sensitive in a way about it than younger people who, for many of them, their lives are so out there anyway, and they do, many of them have already developed quite good coping mechanisms for this sort of thing. But, there are always those people who are vulnerable.
I found myself, particularly after that first programme, I just had an urge. I wanted Channel 4 or somebody kind of with an authoritative hat on to say, we're watching you. We've heard that. And I know that is, you can't do that, you can't get involved. But I felt particularly helpless, and you end up kind of going to Twitter and saying, could you take that tweet down, please? And there's nothing you can do.
We can try and facilitate it, but and that's one thing that parents and children need to know. There's only so much we can do, and we can certainly put pressure on, and we can certainly try and facilitate it, but we can't actually make it happen. Obviously, if it's threatening or and you're really worried about safety or whatever, or it's maybe it's racially aggravated comments or something similar. I mean, obviously they can report it to the police, but I mean, as I say, generally speaking, these things pass, but it's just horrible while it's happening.
Some of the other kids had some awful things said as well, didn't they? I don't think Alfie was alone in it. which again, no, I think, again, sort of adds a bit of perspective to things in as much as that you're kind of going, well, we met that kid and that they're absolutely lovely. How can any, in that case, right, if they're saying that about this person, they're saying that, right, they're clearly just going to say anything about anyone, you know, and that kind of helps you remove your own personal connection from it a little bit, if that's what I mean.
So obviously it didn't scar you too much that you allowed your 2-year-old daughter
Yeah, I know.
to come along with Alfie to take part in
Yeah.
the follow-up in the woods. How was it for you in the woods? In pouring rain and freezing cold?
It wasn't quite.
How did Daisy cope?
Yeah, I think she was okay. She had a bit of a quiet day. We're not sure if she was coming down with a bit of a bug on the first day. So she wasn't quite herself, but she seemed to get into her stride quite well. And yeah, well, we shall see.
We'll see. And
We shall see.
Teresa, how's siblings looking?
Well, without wishing to give anything away, Alfie is the most adorable big brother. And any scenes with him and Daisy on the screen, she just lights it up and she lights him up, and it's very, very winning. The sight of them in the woods is just heartrending.
Good, so we're going to throw it open. Has anybody got any questions? Anyone want to shed any, don't know whether Elisa or Liesl want to say anything about their experiences of being here. Any questions, any comments? No? Oh, there is someone there.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question of Heather, actually, about another Channel 4 show. I assume you would be involved, which is Goggles Sprogs, which is coming back this week. In terms of the kind of content that the producers in Channel 4 would allow the children in that to see, or perhaps some of the higher-end content the children might want to see, but you have to kind of veto. What are the sort of rules and regulations on that?
Well, I'm not the lawyer on Goggles Box, but what I understand and what I imagine would be the case is that those children won't be looking at, although they might look at sort of portions of programs that might otherwise not be, they're not considered appropriate for their age group. And anybody who knows about the series,
Well, we have the commissioning editor,
all right.
3 rows behind
Right.
you, who can, Rob Coldstream, can, if we can get the mic to him, he can tell us exactly what the rules are.
And I believe all the parents know what's coming up and consent. And
I'm not sure I can tell you exactly what the rules are, because I've only inherited this quite recently, but all of the clips that the children see are seen beforehand by a psychologist, and if necessary they are cut down, so if there are particularly disturbing bits, they're removed. And obviously the kids go quite a lot of age, there's a span of age ranges, so each clip is seen with a view to exactly which family is going to be seeing it, and signed off by the psychologist and then by the parents before they see them.
I've seen the first episode, which goes out on Friday, and it's my fault. I was going to get a clip sorted, but I asked too late, and it was too late to get the clip. There is a section in part 4 of Friday's show where the kids are watching a documentary about medics looking at the effect of the winter on Syrian refugees in the jungle in Calais. And one of the children cries as they're watching it, and 3 little kids on the sofa talk about their sense of powerlessness, that children are not able to affect this situation. And it is one of the most moving pieces of television I have seen in a long time. It's absolutely fantastic. It's really, really good. So watch it. Any other questions? Naomi, could you go and get Alfie and we can see his picture?
He's remembered.
Any other? Yes?
Just a question about the weekend. Did any of the participants in that want to withdraw consent halfway through filming? Because I'm wondering, when you're filming in a group situation, if one of those kids wants it to stop, surely that just destroys the entire project.
Yeah, well, no, it wouldn't actually, because we would be able to film around them. But no, nobody did. It was partly fixed camera, partly rig, but we had sort of 3 camera people there. We were very present, actually. There were a lot of us, but there were also a lot of volunteers and therapists. And the kids just sort of we just became part of it. And no, none of them have, I mean, we're in the edit at the moment, so the wobbles will start to happen, I'd have thought, over the next few weeks. And, I mean, we were saying, you know, if a family wants to pull out a week before transmission, you have to sort of suck it up a bit, don't you? Because it's so, you know, important to them. But no, at the moment, it's everything. Everyone's still sort of very much on board.
So are they all consenting? You're not going to have any blobbed faces?
No, they're all consenting. That's why we had a weekend that was just purely for those people who wanted to be filmed, and then the ones that didn't want to be filmed went on another weekend.
Would you like to conclude with just a brief message for programme makers who ever get to get a commission from Channel 4 involving children?
Okay, what I would say to is please, at the very earliest stage, just come and talk to us. Certainly, obviously you're going to be talking to your commissioning editor, but please come and talk to your programme lawyer. Over the last few years, we've built up so much experience of all sorts of things, and we are just a resource for you guys. So come and talk to us, and you know, just suck all the information out of us. And the sooner you do that in the process, the better, really.
And I'll back that up because this department is the programme enabling department. They are so brilliant and always trying to find ways that we can get something on air that we want to get on air. Oh, I've got another question. Yeah.
Just a legal question. With 4ODs, for example, if a child is filmed now on the programme on 4OD for a number of years to come, can they withdraw consent in 5 years' time when they're
That's a good
16?
question.
What happens with that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think generally speaking, we with children or with sensitive subjects, we always do it on a case-by-case basis, and we review the situation, and it might not be, I mean, absolutely. I mean, people, as I said, people's lives change. And even if they did give consent and everything was hunky-dory, things change, and actually we will consider it, you know, and in most instances, frankly, we would take it off. If we know, I mean, that generally speaking, with series that we know are problematic, it'll be part of the production process anyway to keep making contact with people, and it's, you know, it's obviously it's a big job for you guys, just to make sure that everything is okay. With things, but there are series that are out there which we don't think are particularly sensitive, but actually we do get, you know, people do write to us X number of years after the event and just say, actually, do you know what, please, can you take this off? You know, I'm in a different place now. And in most instances, I mean, we do. I mean, I can't think of a case, actually, to be honest, where somebody said it's, you know, time's moved on and it's upsetting and whatever.
We also write an account of how we met the child. So the young children in the weekend, we will give them a document that sort of writes the account of how we met them, how they agreed to be in it, everything that happened with a DVD of the film, so that when they are the right age to watch it, they'll be able to watch it and sort of read exactly what happened to them, so they sort of feel empowered.
Good. Well, thank you very much for Channel 4's legal department. Thank you very much for Emma. Birmingham Children's Hospital is on air on Thursday, and Winston's Wish sometime later in the year. Goggle Sprogs is on Friday night at 8 o'clock. Watch it, it's absolutely fantastic. Secret Life of Siblings is on in July sometime.
End of July.
Horrendously close.
Yeah,
and soon. Where you will be able to see Alfie with Daisy. You brought Daisy along to the latest one.
I'm not really coming because I'm going to Spain on the 19th.
Okay, that's going to be great. You've done a picture for us, which is you on the telly, and then you crying, and then Ruth crying, and you looking after her. So it's an absolutely fantastic picture. Alfie, we're so glad that you came, and it's absolutely brilliant to see you in the flesh, because I've only ever seen you on telly, and it's like brilliant to meet someone famous. So thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you very much, Kev. Thank you.
Well done.